The streetlight had been flickering for weeks, a tired pulse of pale yellow above an empty corner where Maple Row bent gently toward the slow dark river. Most people in the neighborhood stopped noticing it after the first few nights because small towns grow used to little imperfections the same way they grow used to silence. But one person kept noticing. Her name was Leora Vance. Every evening just before midnight she passed beneath that restless light on her way home from a late shift at a quiet roadside diner 2 blocks away. The walk was short and familiar, safe in the ordinary way small American streets feel safe. Front porches breathing soft music from old radios. Wind chimes turning slowly in cool autumn air. A distant highway humming like a lullaby no one fully hears. Nothing about Maple Row looked like the kind of place where something could vanish without a sound. Yet on a cold Thursday night in early October, Leora Vance disappeared beneath that flickering streetlight. No scream. No broken glass. No sudden movement in the quiet dark. Only footsteps that stopped where the light kept blinking on and off like a slow, uncertain heartbeat trying to remember how to keep time. By morning, the town felt different, though nobody could clearly explain why. The air carried a thin, quiet tension the way it does before a storm that never quite arrives. Neighbors spoke in softer voices. Screen doors closed more carefully. Coffee at the diner cooled untouched as people stared through wide windows toward Maple Row. Because everyone in town knew Leora, even if only in the small everyday ways that make someone part of your life without you noticing. She remembered orders without writing them down. She placed extra fries on plates for tired truck drivers who never asked. She listened when people talked about layoffs, illnesses, broken hearts, or dreams that felt too fragile to say out loud. Some people shine loudly. Others glow in silence. Leora belonged to the quiet kind of light that feels steady enough to trust. Sheriff Calder Boone arrived before sunrise, his boots dark with dew from the grass beside the sidewalk. He stood beneath the broken streetlight and looked down at the pavement as if the ground might still be holding a memory it had not decided to share. There were no signs of struggle. No dropped phone. No scattered bag. No mark that suggested fear or hurry. Only the flicker of light. On. Off. On again. A patrol car rolled slowly past the corner, red and blue reflections sliding across the windows of sleeping houses like colors searching for meaning. But the street remained silent. In towns like this, silence usually meant peace. That morning it felt like something else. Something waiting. Something unfinished. Across the street, behind lace curtains that had not been opened in years, an elderly man named Corvin Hale sat in a narrow chair and stared toward the light. He had not truly slept. Not since the moment close to midnight when the world outside his window seemed to pause between one blink of brightness and the next. For a fraction of time he thought he had seen a shadow move the wrong way. Not walking along the sidewalk. Not crossing the road. But folding inward like darkness closing around a secret it did not want the world to find. He told himself it was nothing. Old eyes playing tricks. Branches shifting in cold wind. Memory confusing the present with dreams. Still he kept staring long after the sheriff arrived because some instincts grow stronger with age instead of weaker. By mid-morning, news of the disappearance spread beyond Maple Row, drifting through grocery store aisles, across school hallways, into quiet barbershops and gas stations where conversations usually stayed simple. People spoke her name carefully, as if saying it too loudly might disturb whatever fragile thread still connected her to the town. Where could she have gone? Why would she leave without telling anyone? How could someone vanish in a place where strangers rarely passed and neighbors noticed everything? Questions traveled faster than truth. They always do. Inside the diner, the morning shift felt wrong without her presence. A half-folded apron still hung on a hook in the back room, waiting for hands that would not return. Her favorite ceramic mug rested beside the sink, a thin faded line of color along the rim. The radio played soft country music, low and steady, yet no one changed the station because silence felt heavier. Time moved forward, but the room seemed paused between seconds. At the counter, a delivery driver named Elric Dane kept glancing toward the door, expecting her to step inside late with an apology and a tired smile that made long nights feel shorter. He had known her longer than most. Not closely, not in the dramatic way stories often describe, but enough to feel her absence like a missing note in a familiar melody. He remembered the last words she spoke to him the night before. "Drive safe tonight, the fog is coming early." Simple, ordinary words. Nothing that sounded like an ending. Outside, Sheriff Boone began knocking on doors along Maple Row, asking careful questions with patient calm. His notebook filled slowly with small details that refused to connect into anything meaningful. No one heard a car. No one saw a stranger. No one noticed fear. Only the flickering light. And the empty space where she should have been walking. By afternoon, clouds pressed low across the sky, turning daylight into a pale grey hush. The kind of sky that makes hours stretch longer than they should. The kind that makes people feel watched even when they are alone. Search volunteers gathered near the corner, neighbors holding flashlights, though the sun had not yet disappeared. Hope makes people prepare early because hope does not understand time. They walked along the river path where fallen leaves drifted across shallow water. They checked empty sheds, unlocked garages, quiet playgrounds, and narrow trails between trees. They called her name into spaces where only echoes answered. Nothing replied. As evening returned, the streetlight began its slow, uneven blinking once more. On. Off. Waiting. Sheriff Boone stood beneath it again, hands resting at his waist, eyes tracing the same piece of pavement he had studied all day. Years of experience told him disappearances rarely stayed simple. Yet something about this one felt stranger than anything he could easily explain. Too quiet. Too clean. Like a page removed carefully from the center of a story. Across the street, Corvin Hale finally opened his front door for the first time in many months. The hinges released a soft, tired sound unused to movement. Cool night air touched his face as he stepped onto the porch and looked toward the sheriff standing under the restless light. For a long moment he said nothing. Silence stretching between two men who understood different shapes of loneliness. Then Corvin spoke, his voice rough from disuse yet steady with quiet certainty. "I might have seen something." The sheriff turned slowly, careful not to rush the fragile confession. What kind of something? Corvin hesitated because memory can feel unreliable when it refuses to behave like logic. What he remembered did not feel solid enough to hold. And yet it would not let him rest. "A shadow," he said softly. But not like a person. More like the light forgot how to shine for a second. The sheriff studied his face, searching for confusion, doubt, or imagination. But Corvin only looked tired. And certain of one truth. Something happened beneath that streetlight. Something the town was not ready to understand. Night settled over Maple Row once again. Porch lights glowing in patient rows. Windows dim behind drawn curtains. Wind moving gently through trees that had witnessed decades of ordinary peaceful evenings. But this night carried a different weight. Because everyone was listening for footsteps that would never return. And beneath the flickering streetlight, the empty pavement kept its silence, guarding whatever truth had erased Leora Vance between one blink of brightness and the next. The question no one could answer slowly formed in the darkness, spreading through quiet houses and restless thoughts. If she did not walk away. And no one took her. Morning arrived slowly over Maple Row, as if the sun itself felt uncertain about rising into a town that no longer felt whole. A thin mist drifted from the river and settled across sidewalks and parked cars, turning familiar shapes into soft grey outlines that looked almost unreal. Sheriff Boone had not gone home. He stood near the corner with a paper cup of cold coffee in his hand, watching the streetlight fade into daylight where its flicker could no longer be seen but somehow still felt. Sleep would not come to him. Because disappearances always carried patterns and this one carried none. Inside his mind he kept returning to the same quiet question. What leaves no sound, no mark, no reason? Search teams resumed at first light. Volunteers in heavy jackets moving through yards, fields, and narrow wooded paths beyond the riverbank. Their voices called her name again and again, gentle at first, then louder as hope tried to fight the growing weight of silence. Leora had lived in this town her entire life. Not once had she given anyone a reason to worry about where she might go or why she might leave. Her routines were simple, steady, predictable in the comforting way small lives often are. Work at the diner. A short walk home. A light in her window before sleep. Nothing hidden. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that suggested a secret waiting in the dark. Yet secrets do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they grow quietly beneath ordinary days. By late morning, Sheriff Boone began retracing Leora's last known hours step by careful step. He visited the diner first. The bell above the door gave a soft, familiar ring as he entered, and for a moment the room felt almost normal except for the empty space behind the counter. The manager spoke in a tired voice explaining that Leora had finished her shift exactly on time. No strange calls. No arguments. No sign of fear. Just the same gentle goodbye she offered every night. Boone studied the small locker where she kept her things. Nothing missing. Nothing unusual. Even her spare sweater still folded neatly on the shelf. He thanked the staff and stepped back outside into air that felt colder than it should. From there he walked the same path Leora would have taken. Past the quiet laundromat with darkened windows. Past a closed hardware store where an American flag hung motionless in the still air. Past driveways where morning newspapers remained unread. Every step felt too ordinary for something terrible to have happened. When he reached the flickering streetlight again, the mist had lifted, leaving the pavement bare and honest under daylight. But honesty revealed nothing. For a long time he simply stood there listening. Not for sound, but for absence. Across the street Corvin Hale watched from his porch, wrapped in a thick coat, though the cold was not severe. He had been replaying the moment in his memory again and again, searching for details that might prove he imagined it. But one detail refused to fade. The shadow had not moved like a person. It had moved like a space where something should be but was not. Near noon a new presence arrived on Maple Row. A dark sedan from the county office carrying investigator Renly saw a woman known for her quiet patience and her refusal to accept easy answers. She greeted Sheriff Boone with a calm nod and listened without interrupting as he explained everything they knew, which was almost nothing. Renly walked slowly beneath the streetlight, studying angles, distances, sightlines. Her eyes moved with careful attention, as if the air itself might be holding a memory just out of reach. Then she asked a simple question. Who saw her last? Boone gestured toward the houses and the silent windows watching them. Maybe no one, he said. Renly looked up at the light above them, even though it was no longer flickering in daylight. Nothing disappears without being seen, she replied softly. Sometimes the witness just does not realize what they saw. Her words settled into the space between them, carrying both hope and quiet unease. Throughout the afternoon she spoke with neighbors one by one. Most stories sounded the same. Ordinary sounds, ordinary silence, ordinary night. Until she reached Corvin Hale. He listened to her questions with careful attention, then described the shadow again, slower this time, choosing each word like something fragile. Renly did not dismiss him. She did not comfort him either. She only asked where the shadow moved. Corvin pointed toward the streetlight. Not away. Not across. Into. The single word lingered in the air. Into. Renly thanked him and stepped back toward the sidewalk, her expression thoughtful in a way Sheriff Boone recognized. It was the look of someone beginning to see a shape where others saw emptiness. By evening, clouds gathered again, dimming the sky earlier than expected. Search teams returned tired and quiet, carrying nothing but mud on their boots and worry in their eyes. Inside the diner, a small group of volunteers organized flyers with Leora picture printed above careful lines of text. Each page felt like an admission that Hope needed help to survive. Elric Dane stood apart from the others, staring at the photograph. He realized he did not know much about her life beyond the diner. Not her favorite music. Not her dreams. Not whether she ever wished to leave this town. The thought troubled him. Because losing someone should not begin with realizing how little you truly knew. Night approached once more, and with it the return of the flickering light. People gathered again at a distance, watching the corner, as if expecting the darkness to reveal something it had hidden the night before. Investigator Renly Sorn remained beneath the streetlight long after others stepped away. She observed the rhythm of the flicker. Slow. Uneven. Almost deliberate. For a moment she closed her eyes, listening not with ears but with instinct, the quiet sense built from years of searching for truths that preferred to stay buried. When she opened them again she spoke softly to Sheriff Boone. This does not feel like someone leaving. He waited. It feels like someone being taken, she continued. But not in the way we understand. Her words carried no drama, only calm certainty, which made them more unsettling. The light flickered again, washing pale color across the empty pavement. On. Off. On. And in that brief darkness between brightness, Renly felt something she could not explain. Not movement. Not sound. But presence. Gone before she could name it. She stepped back slowly, her thoughts racing through possibilities, none of which felt complete. Because if Leora Vance had been taken, the question was no longer who. The question was how. And beneath that fragile blinking light, another deeper question waited silently for someone brave enough to face it. What if the place where she vanished was not empty at all? The third night after Leora Vance vanished settled over Maple Row with a heavier silence than before. By now the search had stretched beyond the town limits. Drones traced slow circles above the riverbanks. State officers checked highways, rest stops, and distant gas stations. Her photograph moved across television screens and glowing phone displays far beyond the quiet streets where she had last been seen. Yet the center of everything remained the same small corner beneath the restless streetlight. Because nothing else in the world explained what had happened there. Investigator Renly Sorn returned just before sunset carrying a thin folder and a colder expression than the day before. Sheriff Boone noticed the change immediately. Hope had not disappeared from her face, but certainty had begun to replace patience. She had spent the entire day studying Old Town records, weather reports, electrical maintenance logs, anything that might seem unrelated to a disappearance yet still whisper toward truth. Patterns mattered, even strange ones. And Maple Row had a history no one talked about anymore. Not frightening, not violent, just quietly forgotten. Decades earlier, before the river path was paved, and before the diner even existed, the same corner had been part of an older road leading toward farmland that no longer remained. Storms had washed sections away over the years. New construction changed the land slowly, covering the past beneath asphalt and lawns. But one detail stayed unchanged. The streetlight. Not the metal pole that stood there now, but the location itself. Marked in maintenance records again and again across different decades as a place where electrical faults returned without clear reason. Lights failing. Circuits burning. Power dropping for seconds that technicians could never fully explain. Small problems. Easily dismissed. Until now. Renly shared the records with Sheriff Boone while the sky dimmed into deep blue evening. Coincidence, he said quietly, though the words sounded uncertain even to him. Maybe, she replied. But coincidence repeats less often than people think. Wind moved through the trees carrying the dry whisper of autumn leaves across pavement. The sound felt louder in the absence of voices. Search volunteers had grown fewer each night as exhaustion replaced urgency. Only a handful of neighbors still watched from porches, waiting without knowing what they were waiting for. Across the street Corvin Hale sat wrapped in blankets, his eyes fixed on the corner, as if looking away might allow something worse to happen. Elric Dane arrived too, though he told no one why. He simply stood near the sidewalk, hands in his jacket pockets, staring at the place where routine had broken. Grief does not always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like refusal to leave. As darkness deepened, the streetlight began its slow, uneven pulse once more. On. Off. On. Renly stepped beneath it again, ignoring the chill that seemed stronger there than anywhere else on the street. She watched the rhythm carefully, counting seconds between light and shadow. Something about the timing felt deliberate. Not mechanical. Not random. Almost like breathing. Sheriff Boone remained a few steps back, observing her the way one watches someone listening to distant music no one else can hear. "What are you looking for?" he finally asked. "Proof," she said softly. "Or permission to believe something impossible." The words settled heavily in the air. Another flicker. During the brief darkness, Renly felt it again. That silent pressure. Like standing too close to deep water at night. She opened her eyes quickly, though she did not remember closing them. "Did you feel that?" she asked. Boone hesitated. Because he had. Just faintly. A shift in the air. A moment where sound seemed to pull away from the world. "Yeah," he admitted. Neither of them spoke after that. Across the street Corvin Hale gripped the arms of his chair, his breathing shallow. The same wrongness he had sensed nights before was growing stronger. Closer. Elric Dane took an unconscious step backward, though he did not know why. The light flickered again. This time longer darkness. Long enough for uncertainty to become fear. When brightness returned, everything looked the same. Empty pavement. Still air. Silent houses. Yet Renly's expression changed. Because something new rested near the base of the streetlight pole. Something that had not been there seconds earlier. Sheriff Boone saw it too and moved forward quickly, his pulse rising for the first time since the search began. It was small, almost unnoticeable. A single object lying on the concrete. Renly crouched slowly as if sudden movement might cause it to disappear. Her hand hovered above it before finally touching the surface. Cold. She lifted it carefully into the light. A name tag from the diner. White plastic with thin blue lettering. Leora. Elric breath caught across the street. Corvin whispered something no one heard. Boone felt both relief and dread at once. Evidence meant progress. But it also meant the darkness was no longer empty. How did this get here, he asked. Renly did not answer immediately, because the question was larger than it sounded. The object was clean, undamaged, not dropped in struggle, not carried by wind, placed. But by what? She looked up at the flickering bulb above them. The electrical hum sounded louder, now almost forming a low trembling tone beneath ordinary hearing. Then the light went out again. Total darkness. For one endless second the world felt suspended. Soundless. Breathless. And in that darkness Renly sensed movement. Not beside her. Not across the street. But everywhere at once. Like space itself shifting quietly. The light snapped back on. She inhaled sharply. Because the air felt different. Charged. Watching. Sheriff Boone noticed her fear, and that frightened him more than anything else so far. "What is it?" he asked. Her voice came quieter than before. "We are not looking at where she went." He waited. "We are standing on it." The meaning unfolded slowly, painfully. Not a path. Not an escape. A point. A place where something opened. Just long enough. Boone shook his head, instinct fighting the idea. People do not vanish into nothing. Renly's gaze remained fixed on the ground. "No," she said. "But maybe nothing is not what we think." Wind rushed suddenly down Maple Row, strong enough to rattle porch chains and scatter dry leaves in spinning circles around the streetlight. Neighbors stepped back into doorways, unease spreading without explanation. The flicker grew faster. On. Off. On. Off. Like a signal losing control. Corvin Hale tried to stand, but weakness forced him back into the chair. His eyes filled with a memory older than logic. Something from childhood dreams he had spent a lifetime forgetting. Elric felt tears rising, though he still did not understand why. Only that the world no longer felt stable beneath his feet. Renly closed her hand around the name tag, holding it like an anchor to reality. Because one truth had become unavoidable. Leora Vance had not simply disappeared. Something had reached through the ordinary surface of the world and touched her life at exactly midnight. The question was no longer where she was. The question was whether the place she had gone could open again. The light above them flickered wildly. Then, without warning, it stayed dark. Completely. As if waiting. Darkness remained where the streetlight should have been. Not the soft natural darkness of night, but a deeper stillness that felt heavy against the skin. As if the air itself were holding its breath. No one on Maple Row moved. Even the wind seemed to retreat, leaving the trees frozen in quiet silhouettes. Sheriff Boone waited for the bulb to spark back to life. For the ordinary world to return and prove that fear had imagined everything. But the light stayed out. Beside him, Renly Sorn did not look surprised. Only focused. Her eyes fixed on the exact circle of pavement where Leora had last been seen. Because now the absence felt shaped. Defined. Like an open doorway made of nothing at all. Across the street, Corvin Hale whispered a trembling prayer he had not spoken in decades. The words felt fragile in the thick silence. As if sound itself might break something unseen. Elric Dane took another slow step backward until his shoulder touched the cold surface of a mailbox. Grounding himself in something solid. Something real. Seconds passed. Or minutes. Time had begun to feel uncertain. Then a sound emerged. Not loud. Not sudden. A low distant hum rising from nowhere and everywhere at once. Too steady to be wind. Too deep to be electricity. Renly felt it first in her chest before she heard it with her ears. A vibration beneath the surface of the world. Like the echo of something vast moving far below ordinary reality. Boone looked at her, searching for explanation. But she only shook her head slowly. The darkness inside the circle of pavement shifted. Not visibly. Not in any clear shape. Just a subtle distortion. Like heat above desert asphalt. Except the night air was cold. Corvin gasped softly. Because he recognized the feeling from the night Leora vanished. The moment when the shadow folded inward. Elric pressed his hands against his temples, trying to steady the sudden rush of memory and fear. Part of him wanted to run. Another part could not leave. Renly stepped forward. Carefully. Deliberately. Each movement slow, as if approaching the edge of deep water. Sheriff Boone reached out instinctively. "Do not," he said quietly. But she continued until her boots stood at the very border of the darkened circle. The humming grew stronger. Still low. Still distant. Yet undeniable now. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm without permission. For a brief instant doubt touched her. Not about what she felt, but about whether understanding it would change anything. Then she spoke almost to herself. If something opened once, it can open again. Boone felt the meaning before he accepted it. "You think she is still alive?" Renly did not answer immediately, because hope can be dangerous when built on the unknown. Finally she said one careful truth. "I think she is somewhere. And somewhere is more than nowhere." The words settled into the silence like fragile glass. Suddenly the humming stopped. Complete stillness returned. So sudden it felt unnatural. Renly breath caught. Because silence like that does not last. The darkness inside the circle deepened. Not spreading outward, but pulling inward. Condensing. A faint glow appeared at its center. Soft. Colorless. Almost invisible. Boone felt cold move through his body, though the night temperature had not changed. Corvin gripped the porch railing with shaking hands. Tears forming without sound. Elric stared, unable to blink. The glow brightened slowly, revealing not light, but depth. Like looking down an endless hallway made of shadow and pale mist. Renly understood in a single overwhelming moment. This was not a place. It was an opening. And it was happening again. Boone's voice broke through the tension. Renly stepped back. But she could not. Because something else had appeared within the faint glowing depth. A movement. Unclear. Distant. Human-shaped. Her breath left her lungs in a sharp, fragile whisper. "Leora." The figure seemed suspended far beyond reach. Neither walking nor falling. Simply existing in a space without direction. Elric shouted her name from across the street, the sound cracking with desperate hope. Corvin began to sob openly, the years of silence inside him breaking all at once. Boone felt the world tilt between miracle and terror. Renly forced herself one step closer, ignoring fear, logic, and every rule she had ever followed. Because some moments demand belief before proof. The humming returned, suddenly louder than before. The glow flickered. The distant figure wavered like reflection on moving water. Time was running out. She felt it with absolute certainty. If the opening closed again, Leora might vanish forever. Renly turned toward Boone, her voice urgent but steady. "If I go in, pull me back if it starts to close." His mind resisted the idea instantly. Every instinct screamed no. But another truth rose beneath the fear. They were already beyond ordinary choices. He grabbed her wrist, tightly grounding her to the world behind her. "You come back," he said. Not a command. A promise. A plea. She nodded once. Then stepped forward into the glow. Cold, unlike anything she had known, rushed around her. Not freezing, but empty. Like stepping outside reality itself. Sound disappeared. Weight disappeared. Even fear felt distant. For a moment she thought she might dissolve into nothing. Then she saw Leora clearly. Floating in soft grey light, eyes open yet unfocused, as if caught between dream and waking. Renly reached out her fingers inches away, yet feeling impossibly far. "Leora," she said, though no sound existed. Somehow the name still travelled. Leora eyes shifted slowly, finding her. Confusion. Relief. Weak, fragile awareness. Her lips moved, forming silent words. "Help me." Behind Renly the glow trembled violently, the opening beginning to collapse. Boone felt her weight pulling away from his grip. Panic surged through him. Now he shouted though he could not hear his own voice. Renly caught Leora's wrist just as the light fractured into shards of brightness and shadow. For one impossible second, three worlds seemed to exist at once. The silent void. The glowing threshold. The dark street of Maple Row. Then everything snapped. Light exploded outward. Wind roared down the street. Corvin covered his face. Elric fell to his knees. Boone pulled with every ounce of strength he had. And suddenly, silence. The streetlight blazed back to life, steady and bright as if it had never failed. Renly lay on the pavement gasping for air. Her hand still gripping another hand. Warm. Real. Alive. Leora Vance breathed beside her, weak but present tears sliding silently across her temples into the cold October night. No one spoke, because some moments are too sacred for words. Above them the streetlight no longer flickered. It simply shone, as if the doorway had finally closed. But one question remained trembling beneath relief and disbelief. Where had Leora been? During the time the world could not reach her. For a long time no one on Maple Row moved. The night held them gently, as if afraid that even the smallest motion might break the fragile miracle resting on the pavement beneath the steady glow of the streetlight. Leora Vance breathed in slow, uneven pulls of air. Each breath soft but real. Each breath proof that the impossible moment had truly happened. Renly Sorn lay beside her, staring upward into the pale circle of light. Her body trembled from cold and shock and something deeper she could not yet name. Yet her hand never released Leora's wrist, as if letting go might allow the darkness to return and claim her again. Sheriff Boone finally knelt beside them. Years of training told him to speak, to assess, to control the scene. But none of those instincts fit this moment. So he did the only human thing left. He whispered her name. Leora's eyes fluttered slowly toward the sound. Confusion moved across her face like someone waking from a dream that lasted far too long. Her lips parted but no words came. Only a faint, fragile breath. Across the street Corvin Hale wept openly. Not quiet tears hidden in shadow, but deep shaking sobs pulled from somewhere inside a lifetime of silence. Because he understood something the others were only beginning to feel. Some doors are never meant to open, and some miracles carry a cost that cannot be seen yet. Elric Dane remained on his knees, unable to stand. Relief flooded through him so suddenly it almost felt like pain. He pressed his hands against the cold ground, trying to steady the overwhelming rush inside his chest. The simple truth that she was alive felt larger than anything his heart knew how to hold. Minutes passed gently. An ambulance arrived with soft, distant sirens that seemed careful not to disturb the quiet. Paramedics moved with respectful calm, lifting Leora onto a stretcher, wrapping her in warmth and questions she was too weak to answer. Renly tried to stand, but the world tilted sharply. Boone caught her before she fell. "You pulled her back," he said softly. Renly shook her head, once her voice barely more than breath. "No." She was still holding on. The words lingered between them, filled with meaning neither could fully explain. As the ambulance doors closed, Leora's gaze searched weakly through the small window. Not for the crowd. Not for the street. For the light. Renly saw it and felt a quiet chill move through her. Because gratitude was not the only emotion in Leora's eyes. There had been fear too. And something else. Memory. The ambulance disappeared down the silent road, carrying relief and questions with it. Neighbors slowly returned to their homes, speaking in hushed voices like people leaving a sacred place. Only Boone, Renly, Corvin, and Elric remained beneath the streetlight that now shone steady and ordinary. Ordinary again. Yet nothing would ever truly be ordinary here. Corvin was the first to speak, his voice worn but clear. Did she suffer? Renly looked toward the empty road where the ambulance lights had vanished. I do not think time moved the same way where she was. Corvin nodded slowly, as if that answer matched something deep inside his own past. Something he had never spoken aloud. Days passed. The town tried to return to routine. Stores reopened. School bells rang. Coffee poured once more inside the diner. But Maple Row was no longer just another quiet street. People drove slower when passing the corner. Some glanced at the streetlight. Others avoided looking at all. Because belief had changed shape here. And once belief changes, it never fully returns to what it was. Leora remained in the hospital for observation. Doctors found no injury, no illness, nothing that explained where she had been. Only extreme exhaustion and memories she struggled to describe. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a distant softness, as if part of her still listened to another place. She described silence without loneliness, darkness without fear, a feeling of waiting without knowing what she waited for, and light far away, always just out of reach. Renly visited quietly, sitting beside the bed without asking too many questions. Because some truths need space before they can breathe. One evening Leora turned her head slowly toward her. "I heard voices," she whispered. Renly remained still. Not words. Just feelings. Like someone searching for me. A pause, gentle and heavy. "You found me." Renly felt emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. Not pride. Not relief alone. Connection. Weeks later, autumn deepened into early winter. Leaves disappeared. Cold sharpened the air. Life continued in the steady rhythm small towns understand best. Leora returned home. The night she first walked again along Maple Row, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. Porch lights glowed warmer. Curtains shifted softly as neighbors watched without wanting to intrude. She moved slowly but with quiet strength. Each step a promise to the ordinary world she had nearly lost. When she reached the streetlight, she stopped. Renly, Boone, Elric, and Corvin stood nearby, not speaking. Simply present. The light above her remained steady, calm, unchanged. Just metal and glass and electricity once more. Yet everyone felt the memory resting there like an invisible echo. Leora looked up into the glow. Her expression peaceful but thoughtful. "It is closed," she said gently. Renly stuttered her. "Do you feel it?" Leora nodded. "Yes. And no." The answer sounded strange yet true. Like something understood by the heart before the mind. Corvin stepped closer than he had in years, his fragile voice carrying quiet wonder. "Why you?" Leora considered the question for a long moment. "I do not know." Then softly, "Maybe I was not the only one waiting." Silence followed, but it was no longer heavy. It felt open. Breathing. Snow fell for the first time that season, a thin gentle drift turning the street silver beneath the steady light. Each flake disappearing the moment it touched the warm pavement inside the circle. Elric smiled through quiet tears. "Looks normal again," he said. Boone answered with calm certainty. "Nothing about this place will ever be normal." Renly kept her eyes on the light, understanding something deeper. Normal is just what we call the mysteries we have not seen yet. Time moved forward the way it always does, patient and unstoppable. Winter softened into spring. Spring warmed toward summer. Stories slowly became memories shared in careful voices. Yet sometimes near midnight, when the town grew perfectly still, people living on Maple Row felt a strange peaceful hush settle over the corner. Not fear. Not danger. Just a reminder that the world is wider than what we see. That darkness is not always empty. And that even in the quietest places something gentle may be listening. Leora continued working at the diner. Pouring coffee. Remembering names. Living the simple life she had always known. But now when she walked home beneath the streetlight, she paused for a single breath inside the circle of glow. Not from fear. From gratitude. Because she understood something few ever learn. That being here, in the ordinary warmth of a small living moment, is a miracle quiet enough to miss. One night long after the town had fallen asleep, Renly passed through Maple Row on her way out of county. She stopped the car beneath the same light and stepped out into the soft summer dark. Crickets sang gently. Wind moved through distant trees. Everything peaceful. Everything still. She looked down at the pavement where the opening had once existed. Nothing remained. Yet she smiled faintly. Not because the mystery was solved, but because some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to remind us. To look closer. To hold tighter. To believe softer. Above her the streetlight glowed steady and calm. No flicker. No shadow folding inward. Only quiet light resting on an ordinary road. Renly whispered one final thought into the warm night air. Stay closed. The wind carried the words away without answer. And that was enough. Because somewhere beyond sight, beyond sound, beyond understanding, the darkness remained vast and silent, but no longer lonely. And beneath a streetlight that would never flicker again, life continued. Simple, fragile, beautiful, just as it always had.